To break down the format of this video, I'm going to go ahead and explain the difference in the stages that we're going to use. I have my PC version booted up here, which we're going to be playing in the Canyon map here with the regular colors of the characters. But when I transition over to this screen here, I actually have a PlayStation 4 Pro version of the game that is unpatched, meaning that we are going to be operating on the old system mechanic rules as well as the old character changes. Just to give you a demonstration, let's go ahead and jump into the first change. The removal of DPRC. DPRC has been removed from Guilty Gear Strive in patch 1.38. What this means is that if you have a frame 1 invincible reversal move, you can no longer RC cancel it on block or on hit. As you can see on my inputs on the left, Soul Bad Guy here does a DP, but there is no RC cancel, and this means in all contexts. If the opponent blocks it, if the opponent gets hit by it, there is simply no follow-up to this now. This is, of course, a very big system mechanic change and a nerf to many characters who use this as a very powerful defensive option since the game's release 3 years ago at this point. Compare this situation in the old patch before. Let's say Kai is running offense against Leo and decides to incorporate frame traps to try and catch a countermash. Leo instead decides to go for a DP, and because he has 50% tension gauge, he's able to immediately convert this into a full combo from a blocking position. From there, Leo is able to immediately go into his game plan with back stance, get significant core carry, etc. You'll forgive my lack of an optimal example here, as I don't play Leo personally. If instead Kai decides to block against the DP, ending his pressure earlier, Leo is instead able to take his turn after an RC. This would be equivalent to spending a yellow Roman cancel. However, there is one important difference here in this example, and that is Leo's ability to change which way he recovers out of this RC. Leo can fast RC into an overhead that's pretty fast. He can also down cancel his Roman cancel and then go for a very quick low as well. This creates basically a 50-50 situation where in some situations he's able to actually secure a round kill off of 50-50 when he was in a completely defensive spot before. This is really strong, especially considering the fact that basically not only is your opponent guessing 50-50s on whether or not you're going to flash kick in the first place, but then afterwards you make them take a strike high-low mix-up after you make them block this reversal attempt. This was really strong and impressive in the metagame of Strive. Now, however, that mix-up situation no longer exists because you can't RC and make this DP safe or create a mix-up off of it anymore. If the opponent blocks it, you simply get punished for it. This change actually makes a meaningful choice between spending your tension gauge on a yellow Roman cancel or going for a DP. Before, if you had 50% tension gauge, you basically should just go for DP, and then you can use the meter to convert your hit or to create a mix-up on block or continue your pressure on block. Now, though, since you can't spend the tension gauge on the DP anymore, you have to choose between going for the input and getting an immediate invincible strike that can damage your opponent, get them off of you, or spending your tension gauge instead on a usually safer option that can get your turn back for you and let you press a mix-up. I kind of like now that you have to make this decision between these two options instead of just going for the stronger option in all scenarios. To compensate for these changes, Arc System Works has decided that Dragon Punches should now no longer be throwable. As you can see there, once I get the DP input out, I'm able to actually beat the throw cleanly, whereas that timing would have been able to throw me out in the previous patch. This is kind of making it so that Strive falls more in line with how other fighting games behave. Street Fighter 6, Granblue Fantasy vs. Rising, those games have Dragon Punches, but you couldn't throw them in those games. It's a little weird that you could throw Dragon Punches in the first place. I'm pretty sure there's precedence for it before Guilty Gear Strive, but not really in modern-day fighting games. So I, for one, appreciate that Strive is now going to something that falls in line with how other fighting games treat their strike throw and how they interact with Dragon Punch pressure. So this is a nice bit of compensation. It would be remiss of me to not mention that this is a direct nerf to characters that use command throw in their offense. Before, if they had to read that you're going to DP, they could go for their high reward command throw and punish you outright for it. Now, both of their strikes and their throws lose to the Dragon Punch option, meaning that they want to beat it out, they have to make a hard call and block it. This has a lot of matchup implications, as well as just, once again, forcing the RPS to fall more in line with other fighting games. Dragon Punches weren't the only moves that lost their ability to be Roman canceled. Baiken's counter move, her Haragi, also had this change applied to her. This means that she can no longer wake up OS with her Haragi stance, and in case if it doesn't hit its very small activation window against an opponent's strike, she is not able to cancel this into a PRC and keep herself safe. When she Haragis here, it's a full commit. This also has the drawback against her, though, that if she does successfully get Haragi, she can no longer cancel this into an RC to then get a combo. The damage you get from a successful Haragi is all that you get. I'm not sure if the inability to RC a successful Haragi was intended in this patch or not, and it's pretty bizarre to me that it is the case, and I hope it's something they do fix in the future. As it is right now, I think that Haragi is worse than DPs on almost every metric in this version of the game. You can't PRC it on whiff to make it safe anymore, and you can't also get a combo and extend after this reversal option of yours that only beats strikes is able to connect. I understand that Arc System Works wanted to remove the power of these reversals and make it so that you can't set up an immediate side swap, get a wall splat into a wall break, and snowball the game from a defensive position, but Baiken's Haragi is strictly worse than a DP, especially now that her Haragi is basically the only invincible super that doesn't cost meter in the game that can be thrown. All the other Dragon Punches are invincible to throws now, so you have to guess correctly and block those DPs to make them whiff. You can throw Baiken, or you can bait out her parry and get a punish in either scenario. The only real good situation that Haragi is useful for right now is blowing up meaty safe jumps. Admittedly, this is something that Invincible Dragon Punches can't do, but this is basically the only advantage that Haragi has right now. I know it's a frustrating patch for Baiken players, but I genuinely think that Arc System Works wanted to bring the game into a specific vision and target various reversals to stop a single defensive decision from reversing the game on its head, but I think they overcorrected here in the case of Baiken. This is a smaller patch, and I do think that there's going to be more coming for her in the larger season update at Season 4. Still, it's very strange that Baiken, who is arguably a mid to low tier character, or pretty definitively one, got only a single nerf tier kit with no buffs to compensate. Meanwhile, Sol, a undisputed top tier character of the game, did get buffs to compensate for the overwhelming nerfs to the system mechanics that he used in this patch. It is just very weird treatment from Arc System Works' part. The last thing to talk about in this patch with DPs is the heavy versions of Sol, Kai, and Leos. These have all basically been reworked to be combo tools first and foremost. There's no iframes, their slowdown effect no longer ends on hit, they're not in counter hit state after the active frames end, there's decreased base damage scaling, decreased combo blowback scaling when used to start a combo, a decreased amount of wall break value, as well as increased amount of tension gauge when you use the move itself. So a lot of changes here to give buffs to these moves after they lost their iframes. Now, for Kai and Leo, I can't really find a difference between the previous patches other than like a slight increase in damage, but for Sol Bad Guy, there's a lot of implications here. This is the old patch. Let's say Kai Kisuke DP'd here and I blocked it, and I want to start a punish with a heavy DP. In the old patch, this is what it would look like. My close slash hits as an OTG here, and I don't really get much without spending meter or without going for more fine-tuned setups here. Now, in the new version of the patch, though, this is what Sol can do. Now, apart from me blundering the end of that combo there with the DP input, I think it's pretty clear that this is a massive difference for Sol Bad Guy, and yet another buff to a character who is one of the strongest characters in the game. Granted, Sol has received a lot of nerfs in this patch through system mechanics that we are going to talk about a little bit. Not necessarily pertaining to Sol, but he is affected by these system mechanic changes. But it is still kind of crazy that this character is insistent on Arc System Works' behalf of remaining a strong character with his high damage output, despite all the various other nerfs that he's received, and we'll have to see what they decide to do with him in the Season 4 patch and where his place in the tier list does shift overall. The last thing I want to say about Invincible Reversals is that all the changes we've seen to the meterless special move DPs of characters do not apply to the overdrives. You are still able to Roman cancel out of these at any given moment, provided that you have the meter for it. Let's get into the changes to Wild Assault now. For starters, using Wild Assault to break the wall no longer results in a hard knockdown. This is a pretty massive change to the offense overall in Guilty Gear Strive. At round start, it was very easy for you to use all of your burst gauge to convert a hit with Wild Assault, get a wall stick, and then use the remaining burst gauge to then force the wall break, get a hard knockdown, and start your offense with incredible pressure with positive gauge backing you up. Now, the only way to get a guaranteed hard knockdown is suspended on an overdrive super to get that hard knockdown. This dramatically slows down the snowball effect that Guilty Gear Strive had going on in the previous patch. Accompanying this global change to Wild Assault is also a global change to burst gauge in general. It regenerates slower, and upon wall stick, you regenerate less burst as well. Compare the amount of burst that you gain between these examples. This is the old patch. It's about a third of the gauge. This is the current patch. It's about a fourth of the gauge. This is, again, trying to slow down the amount of Wild Assault, deflect shields, and bursts that are available to us in a match to slow down the overall pace of the game and reduce the snowball effect. But this also does indirectly buff characters that do enjoy wall slumping the opponent, because now instead of them gaining about almost a full stick of burst gauge after you do it twice to them, you can do this about 3 times before they get up to 3/4 of it. So do consider that implication going forward. Let's get into specific versions of Wild Assault changes now. Red Wild Assault has reduced momentum on block, meaning it's worse overall as a pressure tool. As you can see, Soul is close enough to go for a tick throw off of that sequence in the old patch. This is the current patch. He's just outside of throw range now and needs to micro walk forward. There's going to be some larger examples of this going on through, but characters that had far range pokes that could then lead to crazy offense while using Red Wild Assault are going to feel this nerf, whereas characters who didn't have these same pokes but rather use Red Wild Assault as combo conversion tools shouldn't really notice this difference too much. White Wild Assault also received an adjustment. Most notably, it lost its Guard Crush on block. So now if someone uses this to close the gap between you and you block it, they no longer get a true strike throw mix-up on you. This is how it behaved in the old patch. Nago's command throw beats my 3-frame normal here, a Soul Bad Guy. This is how it behaves in the current patch of the game. As you can see, Soul Bad Guy is actually able to punish a White Wild Assault on block. I haven't been able to replicate this with jab, so I think that White Wild Assault is -3, which means only Soul and Chip are able to punish this option. In this situation, you are also outside of throw range, so you can't just block this and then throw the opponent for free. Still, for an invincible option here that's often used as a neutral skip tool and can lead to good combos on hit, the fact that you can now just wait this move out, block it, and then have it be your turn is a massive nerf to this move overall and should make it less frustrating to fight these characters with White Wild Assault. While Red and White Wild Assault saw nerfs, Blue Wild Assault remains unchanged. This is still a true tether for Baiken to set up with the uncharged Blue Wild Assault. Blue Wild Assault was always good, but was outshined by its red and white counterparts, and I think that with the nerfs to the other ones, it might be the best Wild Assault in this game right now. Still, the nerfs of the burst mechanics overall, as well as the change to the wall break on Wild Assault, should mean that it's not as potent, but Blue Wild Assault should still stick out, I think, as the best Wild Assault in this patch. That concludes talking about the system mechanic changes. Now we can look into some more of the character-specific stuff, starting with Axl Low. Axl Low has tons of changes in his kit this patch. Most notably, I think, is his heavy slash change, where now he gets a launch effect on grounded hit. This is how it behaved in the old version, and this is it in the new version. This gives him plenty of new combo options, which I'll now show courtesy of some friends of mine. Axl Low's JS also receives some adjustments. It has less horizontal blowback distance on aerial hit, as well as increased launch height on aerial hit. In the old version of the game, this is what it would look like. As you can see, Soul pretty much goes straight down to the ground. This is how it looks like in the current version of the game. As you can see, Soul remains in air for a little bit longer. This has some big combo implications for him. Axl Low also received some changes to his Whistling Wind, his new special move. When the projectile comes into contact with something other than the character, so imagine like a projectile or a Jacko minion or something that occupies the screen, it no longer decreases the number of hits it deals to the character, which should improve its damage in some combos after it trades with something, or make it behave more consistently. It has increased movement speed for the charge version as well. In the old patch, this is how fast it would move. As you can see, it goes about half screen. This is how it behaves in the new patch. It almost reaches Soul Bad Guy from full screen. This does a lot for Axl's space control in the middle of the screen. Not that he really struggled with it before, but still, it is more imposing and threatening overall, which helps Axl out. The projectile does slow down when the charge version of the projectile comes into contact with the opponent, which should help it kind of have some of that longer lasting hits to it as well. Overall, those are the changes to Axl that I think are most notable. His snail also does no longer allow recovery after you hit it with a counter hit, so on counter hit, it does lead to a hard knockdown. As well as the Sickle Storm got a couple of quality of life buffs as well, but the other changes were pretty much most of the stuff that you should be paying attention to. Potemkin is another character who received some buffs this patch, which makes sense considering that he's going to be feeling the effects of the White Wild Assault nerfs. For starters, his standing heavy slash now leads to a hard knockdown on an aerial opponent hit. This is how it behaved before. You can see Soul gets up pretty quickly. This is how it behaves now. You have time to go for a Hammerfall here to close the gap and continue your offense. This change also applies to Potemkin's Hammerfall. As you can see, Soul gets up pretty quickly in this old version, and here it is in the new version. Once again, Potemkin should be able to set up a Mita Garuda impact here, basically whatever kind of Oki that he wants after a successful hit. It seems they want Potemkin's pokes to lead to stronger knockdown situations for him so they can run his game plan more often, which I think is warranted for the character. Besides some quality of life changes to his ground throw and his slide head, the only other change I think is really going over with Potemkin is changes to his heavily Potemkin buster. They reduced the range requirement for the attack to connect, they adjusted the angle of the leap, as well as the timing of the grab to be at the same time as the leap. The super flash is shorter, the invincibility duration extends to after the super flash, so this should all make it easier to grab opponents at lower heights, and they increase the damage as well as the damage rate. To give you an idea of what the arcs look like, this is what it used to look like. Goes very vertical, and you barely get any sort of horizontal distance against Soul. This is how it currently looks. You get a lot more horizontal range with this jump afterwards. There's also some funny Twitter clips that I want to show right now regarding what this move can now catch because of the changes. I did lie. I did forget to mention about the JD new disjointed hitbox since they reduced the hurtbox on it. This would have hit in the old patch, and now you can see here that JD is actually able to beat the Milia close slash anti-air. So, quick shout out to Frank and Tank for those couple of pictures to best illustrate the change to JD that I was not going to be able to cook up in the amount of time I'm working on this video, as well as to Ankle Gator for the clip against Milia. And then there should be one more thank you, I think, two more actually. Roncastel here for the clip against Baiken that I used, and then there's also the clip against Elphelt posted by a user with Cactus in their name that I believe missed, but you can find them under the hashtag GuiltyGearStrive Potemkin if you want to go check them out. Zato received a few buffs, and while I don't think they're going to shift him around the tier list, I do think that it's indicative of that Arc System Works probably has more buffs planned for the character. His Pierce special move is now faster on startup. This is the startup and how it looked in the old version of the game. And this is what it looks like in the current version of the game. Don't have the exact numbers on me, but no doubt Dustloop is going to update on these, and Zato players will be able to give insight into implications of this change. Eddie also has faster ground movement now. That's his speed in the old version, and this is the current version. You can see that he does travel a little bit faster, which should help Zato be able to start his offense and pressure from full screen a little more easily, which also goes in tie with his next change, Break the Law. He's able to move to Eddie's current position during Break the Law by inputting down and down. This change namely applies to whenever Eddie is active. So while Eddie is out, you could just pretty much teleport him to regardless of the fact of whatever Eddie is doing. And this is highly compatible with Frog special. So we come through here, right? Then I release. You have to see I have to wait until after Frog is done for me to teleport to Eddie. Whereas in the current version of the game, I'm able to teleport much earlier, and this opens up a lot of opportunities for Zato to convert full screen hits, as well as to extend combos in ways that he didn't have before. I'll show a few Twitter clips now. The last change is what damage is done to the Eddie life gauge by Blue Psychic Burst and Yellow Roman Cancel. Before, if either of these options hit and you had Eddie out, Eddie was completely depleted in terms of life total like this. This meant that Zato was really punished unfairly by these successful reversal options and was in a very bad spot. Now you start regenerating the Eddie life gauge at whatever point the gauge was at when you got hit by these options. Far less punishing in some circumstances. Do note that the rate of regeneration remains the same no matter what the hit was. Testament also received quite a few buffs that may have some importance for the character's performance going forward. Crouching S has decreased knockback, Crouching Heavy Slash has decreased attack startup, and then the Ground Throw has decreased horizontal blowback distance and increased launch height, probably leading to some better Okizeme afterwards off of it. This is the distance in the old patch, and this is the distance in the new patch. As you can tell, it's far closer. You can definitely do some setups with this. Grounded Grave Reaper, the Slash version in particular, has some pretty important buffs. The horizontal move speed is increased after it changes to the Succubus form, and the Succubus spawns in a farther away position. This is how it looked in the old version of the game. As you can see, the Succubus is right next to Soul. This is how it is in the current version of the game. The Succubus spawns farther away from Soul Bad Guy in this example here, which leads to a lot of implications for how Testament can use this, which we'll break down when we talk about a couple other things. The blowback on hit on a knockdown opponent has also been adjusted to increase the advantage slightly. This is what it would look like in the previous version. And this is what it looks like in the current version. So, kind of hard to tell, but there's probably some frame data crunching that can be done here, and I think I have a few examples at the end of this. This, in conjunction with buffs to possession, Testament's teleport, make it a far more attractive tool in some of these interactions as well. The Succubus, for starters, no longer disappears when you teleport to the position. This is how it looks in the current version of the game. You can get multiple uses out of one Succubus call, which I think has a lot of crazy implications that Testament players can have a lot of fun experimenting with. Compare that to the old version of the game where this is what the situation would look like. Only one teleport, and now you have to plant Grave Reaper once again. So, again, a lot of new toys that Testament can play with in this position. There's also decreased recovery on possession, so it's possible that you're going to get some really strong Oki when you use this in conjunction with the OTG Grave Reaper before. And I believe that one of my Colorado players, Cobalt, has some examples of this, which I'll show videos of. This is an example of a possible pressure sequence that you can get from a combo with Testament now with all these changes pretty much put together. With the throw changes as well as the Reaper buffs, you're able to get a breakdown from Jay's Jousting here about how fully charged Reaper after throw in the corner leaves you plus 22, save to DPs, perfect space in the combo after high Arbiter sign, micro walk back on the Arbiter for consistency, etc., etc. So a couple of other things here. But when we take a closer look at it, full charge, you're plus, you get Arbiter stuff, so... Again, a lot of strengths to Testament's mix-up in Okizeme game, actually, which I think is something that's really cool to see for the character who has usually relied on their zoning tools and not really had a lot of offensive fun to play with, possibly up until right now. The changes to possession with the reduced recovery also leave it as a pretty messed up Okizeme option select here, as demonstrated by Gekumya Dog. I believe I probably butchered that pronunciation, but want to try and give credit where it's due. So on throw, you can go for this sequence. As you can see, it baits throw. And it safe jumps DP with the iframe. So this is pretty potent stuff for Testament to be having, but there's still one more buff to actually mention with this character, and that is to their Arbiter Sign. Arbiter Sign has been buffed, so now that it has full screen tracking on both of its versions. This is the maximum range and distance that you would get in the old patch. So you could stand at full screen and be just outside of this range. And here's their range with the current patch. So, combo routes for Testament are likely buffed with this change, as well as their full screen presence even further, which was already in a pretty good spot. Testament is really celebrating this patch, and we might see the character start to rise up in the ranks, I think, with the new offensive tools that they have in this patch. Sin has a couple of changes that are specific to his kit and how it interacts around his Hawkbreaker DP. They're all basically tied around the idea that if your DP gets blocked, you can't really do anything and you're going to be eating a punish. So now Hawkbreaker can no longer be canceled into Gazelle Step on block. This is the old version of the game, and honestly, at a high-level play, this really doesn't have any sort of place in there because you just knew how to punish this DP. But at lower levels of play, the situation is probably going to look something more like this in the current version. So you can see there's no Gazelle Step canceling out of it, so you can't just sort of cheese your way against people who don't know the matchup anymore. While they did remove the ability to go into Gazelle Step from Hawkbreaker on block, you can still do it on hit in the current patch. However, you're not able to Kara cancel this into Tyrant Rave in this version of the game after Hawkbreaker. You can still do it from other special moves, though. So there is that to consider with Sin as well. They're really just covering all of the loopholes and stuff, because if you did have 100% tension gauge and you went into Tyrant Rave with Sin, you would be able to make a DP safe, but they completely removed all of those functionalities in every way, shape, and form. So kind of just an interesting thing to note. Bedman is another character with a slew of buffs to his kit, most of them to his normal moves. However, his forward jump also got buffed to have more forward momentum. This is what it looked like before, and this is what it looks like now. As you can see, Soul's model starts to overlap a lot more with the Lila here. So this has a couple of implications for various setups that Bedman can create going forward. Bedman's close standing slash actually has a changed hit effect now. Before, it would keep the opponent grounded. Now it actually launches the opponent into the air. This means that if you do some other moves, you do get some launches. This probably has some implications to go with his various special moves and setups that he can create, which I'm going to find some Twitter clips for. To complement this, his far standing slash has decreased knockback and a decreased horizontal blowback distance on aerial hit, probably just to make sure they can combo more friendly. Jump S also got a couple of interesting changes. There's now a vacuum effect when it comes to contact with the opponent. It has faster startup, and the lower hitbox and hurtbox have been expanded. This is what the move would behave like in the old patch. Pushing Soul Bad Guy away. And this is how it looks now. Pulling Soul Bad Guy in. This has, again, a lot of implications for his air-to-air confirms, possibly bringing the opponent closer so that he gets more real hits in those air-to-air situations, and potential mix-up situations on the ground, potentially. The last change Bedman received was to his Jump Dust, and now launches on grounded hit. Before, it would simply push the enemy back like this, and now it launches on hit like so. Again, probably leading to some more guaranteed setups off of his various resources. We can kind of make sense of these changes when we look at some Bedman players labbing out and posting their finds. Starting off, we have a poach from the Ashihanaju. This showcases the Jump S being able to vacuum in to improve air combos, and then we're able to get closer situations to actually go for jumping cross-ups. Bedman seems to have some pretty good Oki. As you can see, there's plenty of potential here for crazy mix-ups with the character now. Andrea De Castro posts this with regards to a mid-screen safe jump that Bedman now has with the buffs. Again, improving his Okazemi. And now more findings from Andrea De Castro as well. Here's a side swap in the corner. The next video includes this. Again, another use of JS. Stealing the corner with an Okazemi setup and then putting us back into the corner to break the wall. Going for multiple overheads and getting the launch from Jump Dust, I believe. Into a guard crush setup. And a new corner combo route as well, with plenty of damage here for Bedman. All in all, Bedman players are eating really good this patch, and who knows what we'll see from the character. Johnny's another character with a couple of significant buffs. For starters, his forward dash has decreased recovery. That's what it looks like now, and this is what it used to look like. Quite a big difference. Because of Johnny's new dash recovery, any sort of safe jump Okizeme that you had before is going to be mistimed now. We already see here that Uwabami Johnny has a new safe jump setup for us off of his Joker trick. Whiff 2P, do a dash jump into an IAD jump heavy. Johnny's dash now being 15 frames. I have a specific number thanks to this tweak now. This means that if he gets a throw, he's able to dash, drop a card, and then do close slash and be able to do a +6 on block meaty. If you backdash it, you're -9, and he's able to do far slash, punishing it, and then launch for a full combo as demonstrated here. So again, Johnny's neutral is now safer, his movement is better, and his Okizeme is improving. You can also see that the new dash improves his combo routing as well. His standing heavy slash also has an expanded frontal hitbox. This is what the old range of it was, and this is the new range of it. It's slightly farther, and so I think the implications is more about allowing it to hit in certain parts and combos where it didn't used to hit before. The most important change to Johnny this patch is the addition to counter hit properties on all of his misfiners. Before, you get a hit like this and really wouldn't have the opportunity to do a whole lot of things. And now you get a proper slowdown off of all of them. This opens up huge combo potential for Johnny for using these as neutral poke tools and makes them more rewarding. Heck, if you even use them in some pressure sequences and the opponent chooses to mash on them and you get a hit, you might be able to save resources and get a full combo anyway. I got some examples from Twitter. Here we can see some implications of misfiners now being able to have slowdown on counter hit. It's very clear that his pokes are much more rewarding with these moves now. The last thing to mention with Johnny that got changed was his deal mid-air heavy slash during vault. Instead of having to manually tap the button, you can now hold it and Johnny will throw the card as soon as possible. Making this input a little more stable and consistent is probably nice for some of his combo routing as well as pressure. The last character to talk about is Elphelt. Her crouching light punch is now a 4-frame normal instead of a 5-frame normal. This is her old 2P, and this is her new 2P. It's going to be a very small difference for a lot of people, but this does mean that her defense with her mashing is far better than it was before. Her far slash is less affected by her dash momentum. This is what it used to behave like. And this is how it behaves now. You can see that she stops a little bit more in place now. I'm not sure what the point of this change is, but maybe an Elphelt player can let me know. Her JS has expanded upper hitbox and hurtbox. I don't really have a good way of demonstrating this, but I also didn't want to not mention it in the video. On the ground, her Miss Charlotte special has a couple of changes. The backward movement distance is expanded, the beginning of the move's projectile properties changed, and it has decreased recovery. This results in a couple of things. Before, if you got up close with Elphelt and you used this move, a situation like this could happen. As you can see, you're able to shoot through the opponent and have a bullet bounce on back. However, it's very painfully clear that you are insanely negative in this particular circumstance. Which it seems to be stabilized for the most part when you use it in a block string like so. However, now, in the current version of the game, if you were to run a point blank like this, so-called stuff the barrel, you can see that the opponent is pushed way farther back and you're -7 at a range where basically you are unpunishable by anything. One of the implications of the change to her Miss Charlotte on the ground is that she's able to space herself away from some of the opponent's Abari options. We can see here that using the gunshot is actually able to sort of bait out a 6P and create a favorable situation for you. Of course, this is if the opponent tries a 6P in this situation. If they just block, well, they just block it. But still, it's good to have that in the back pocket. The changes to Miss Charlotte mean that it actually also functions as a great invincible DP bait. Before, Elphelt really just had to kind of stop blocking at her normals and force the turn, but now she has a safe way to end her strings. And also with it, she's able to create these spacings that basically auto-punish DPs for her, with a pretty good starter, I'd say. I think this adds some much-needed dimension to the character. Her Miss Charlotte out of repair special has a decreased horizontal blowback on hit. This means that it does lead to some better Oki. This is how it behaves in the current patch. As you can see, the opponent is left within range of a far slash. And this is how it behaved in the old patch. just outside of Far Slash's range. Arguably the most important change to Elphelt is her Bonbon Chocolat, which now launches the opponent on grounded hit. Before, you'd have to connect this into a jump normal, usually her JD, in order to get anything valuable. And even then, that can be finicky at times. Compare that to what you can get now. With the launching hit, you're able to link it to 5k, and I think that opens up your combo routes by a lot. This is a rudimentary example, but we can look at some more high-level examples here. If you hit it here, you can link the JS and all these changes and create a safe jump situation as well off of it, allowing you to, again, get better Okizeme and maintain your offense. This change also has implications for her combo rewards as well. With the launch, you're able to get some meaningful damage off of counter-hitting pokes. The last buff that Elphelt got was her Command Throw Super, which you really didn't see used at all because it was pretty hard to go into and didn't lead to a whole lot. The distance after it successfully connects has now been standardized across the cast. There's forward movement before the attack starts up, and the proximity requirement for it to connect has been expanded, meaning that it should be easier for Elphelt players to tick throw into this. To give you an example, this is what the situation would look like before. I could do a close slash and this attack would whiff. But now if I go for this setup, again, it's very rudimentary, this example, but the fact that it's probably easier to go into means that this could be a tool that Elphelt finally is able to add into her kit and arsenal. I want to say thanks for watching this video up to this point. It took me a while to make it, a couple of days in fact, and I wanted to finally add on by sharing my brief thoughts on this overall patch. I think it's a pretty good patch. It seems to be a lot of steps in the right direction by toning down some of the more frustrating elements of the system mechanics while looking at the low-tier characters that really weren't able to keep up with the top tiers and trying to give them more functionality, it seems. Just being able to have more safe jumps, better conversions, stronger conversions, better pressure sequences, and everything like that, as well as more rewards from their strongest tools in their kit. Just really feels like a good way to take the game, and I'm excited to see if there's any sort of shakeups in terms of results or anything else like that with the coming meta. There are a couple of oddball decisions here and there. For example, like nerfing Baiken from a system mechanic standpoint without buffing her to compensate for it. That just feels a little bit out of place, but I suppose that Arc System Work thinks she's in a fine enough spot where she didn't need any compensations, and they wanted to, again, target the more frustrating elements of the patch with the reversals to reduce the volatility of the game and the snowball that you can get from tools like Wild Assault. And there's certainly going to be more planned for the Season 4 patch, which who knows what they're going to do. Again, for a small patch right here, they actually did quite a lot of things to hopefully improve like the overall state of the game. For the couple of us that have missed out on some things, the time will be coming, I hope, in October, where characters like Baiken will get buffed, characters like Zato will get buffed, and a couple other tweaks here and there to potentially tone down some of the top-tier characters, right? I think there will be potential for a lot more nerfs to be coming out in the next patch, which we'll see what Arc System Works decides to do. But either way, y'all, I'll see you in Season 4 for Guilty Gear Strive.